Welcome back to another Dr. Supercoach podcast powered by Code Sports. You're on this week with Pistol, and as always, my right-hand man, my ride or die. Welcome to the podcast, Pig.
Hey, boss man, Pistol, how you going?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I survived the first bye week when I wasn't on the podcast last week, which, no coincidence, I'm sure, was my weakest bye round. And, Chizo overtook me and, fell to 2.5K. But resurged this week with a 2020 and back past Chizo into 1.5K. So I'll be bobbling around that point, I think, for the rest of the buys. I think I'm pretty average from here on out, but not too bad. I guess it depends on how everyone else goes. But things could be worse. How did you go this weekend, Pig?
This was hopefully my worst bye week. Had quite a few of my primos out. I think I had like 4 of my best players are out, which a lot of people did, but then just a lot of my dudes did not perform. So I had like an 18-12, so we can glance over that.
Oof.
Yeah, not good, but I am looking very solid for the next 2 rounds, which should be really good, hopefully. Yeah, my team, I'm just kind of running out of even cash generators to do my final upgrade, so I'm kind of treading a bit of water, not doing that well, but, that happens. I kind of burnt through quite a few trades, trading people out a bit early and then getting them back in and doing a few silly things, missing Sam Darcy, missing Ollie Dempsey. Captaincy's going really well. So my season in terms of my team is just kind of hovering, not doing much, but I'm still getting a good kick out of providing advice to people, recommending, like last week on the podcast, talked about trading in Brodie Grundy instead of Team English. I mean, only 1 week sample size, but that looked like it went really well. So I guess I'm just still.
I got to thank you for that. That was. I traded in Grundy and put the VC on him because of your advice. So big kudos to you. I enjoyed having a stress-free Sunday. Not having to worry about did I captain Gawn or Dacos, since it felt like a bit of a toss-up. And having a captaincy already locked in was let me enjoy the game a little bit more. So thank you.
Oh, that's all right. Happy to help. I know, like I said, my team's not doing much, but I feel like having this platform, being able to give advice to people, I feel like I've got hundreds of other teams that I've got a little bit of input in, which is quite nice. And some of them are doing quite well, like yours.
Excellent.
So you were on the podcast 2 weeks ago and you kind of talked a big game that you overtook Chizo, and then
I did.
Came on the podcast last week and let everyone know how much he overtook you by and was talking a big game. Do you have anything to say to him now that you're back in the lead?
I'm like 100 points ahead of him now.
Yeah, back in your box, Chizo.
So, it's look, the bye rounds, you can't take it on a round by round basis. You have to go the full, let's just see how we rank at the end of round 15, because everyone's planned their buys differently. Everyone had a different strategy on how, they were going to achieve the best that they could with their team based on the players they had in the buys those guys had. So let's just wait and see, Chizo, before we boast anymore about who's beating who. At the end of round 15, thank you. But before we get into the trades this week, just a shout out very quickly to a patron sign up. It's been a couple of weeks. So a big thank you to Ryan Taylor, who has signed up. We will be running the Dr. Supercoach Cup this year, and that the details will follow. We'll post it in our Patreon. More details on the coming podcast, but it's a staple of the last couple of years. Big trophy up for grabs, a knockout competition. Have to be part of our Patreon group to be part of it and follow the instructions to sign up. But we've typically had, I think we had 700 odd people last year sign up. So it's always a lot of fun and gives you something to play for when you might be feeling a little bit blue, because it's anyone's game at any given time. But the announcement for that and the post on Patreon is, I guess, coming soon. So make sure you don't miss that one, Pig. And on the Cancer Council side, thank you very much for your donation, Stefan. He said the difference between top 1K and where I sit now: Zorko captaincy 2 weeks ago and Nakos this week. Despite knowing about the tag, which is a little bit rough. Can't really predict an injury, but the tag, when it's told to you in advance, you can kind of predict that one, I think.
Yeah, that's a fair enough donation. It'll be interesting to see this week if we have a few more donations. Now we got 6 teams on the bye this week, and then the next week there might be a few more carrying some donuts. Who knows?
Pending what rookies or are not named, and which premiums are or are not named. I mean, if Dacos is rested for a week, suddenly everyone's looking a little bit more shaky, I think, Pete.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be dire. We'll see how we're going. I think I should be good for this week. The following one might be my, I've got a few more in that, but also a few guys that I'd be looking to cull before then. So it'll be interesting to see.
All right. So speaking of people of culling, there's a couple of players that are hot on everyone's, I guess, lips at the moment. The big one, Alex Sexton, he's put in a outrageously good performance for people who've traded him in, 3-4 weeks ago. He scored well. He's made, your cash that you're hoping to make is surpassed 400K. The big question is, with Powell coming back, do you think it's time to jump off Sexton in advance before Powell even returns? Or do you need to wait another week just to check if, Powell does return and whether it's potentially worth holding Sexton for longer? What would you do?
This one's really interesting because, a few weeks ago, I would have said this is the time to get off Sexton, that you're kind of riding him till his bye. He'll make you a fair bit of money, do his job in that regard, but then get off him at his bye. But he's been a lot better than I guess we even expected. He's kind of a keeper forward the way he's going. So I would be probably inclined to hold him and just see what it's like when Powell comes back. Because if you trade him out and he actually just continues to be a keeper in the forward line, that would be a bit of a kick in the backside. So I'm probably inclined to hold him, but also if you're really struggling this bye and you're only fielding 16 or 17 and you have to get rid of him to make 18, maybe that's okay because he's kind of made his money. But I think there's still a bit of a chance that he's a keeper, so I'd probably be trying to hold. But what do you think on that one?
So my issue is Sexton is getting a lot of the footy, but is not super damaging with it. I think from AFL player ratings, he was the second least effective Sun on the ground. It could have even been in the whole match, to be honest. I can't remember exactly. And that's huge given how many times he touched the ball. So he's getting a lot of touches. He's not doing too much to help his team with it. And honestly, if Powell returns, I don't like his chances of keeping up these 80-plus scores. I think if you're going to cop a donut this week because of it, I'd trade him. I'd just say thank you very much. You did your job. Stick to the plan. But if you can hold him and get through with 18 players, I would just see that Powell is named because I guess there is a world in which they just don't name Powell and they just say, okay, Sexton, until you have an absolute stinker, we'll bring Powell back. So I wouldn't want to necessarily jump off early unless I had to. And I think if you were going to get a 0, it's just too many points at this time of the year that you're going to lose from a guy that is unlikely to be a keeper for the rest of the season. So that's kind of where I sit on that one.
Yeah, and there's a couple other guys, like Bodie Hewland was someone that's kind of been in now the team, and I think he's been sub once or twice, but he's been incredible the last few weeks, and also really impactful playing his role. So I'm not sure he would get dropped. I think Joel Jeffries has been kind of maybe playing as that 7th defender going back there, so maybe he could go out for Powell. I'm not sure, but Sexton definitely could be in the firing line. It's a risk. I probably agree with you. If you're going to cop a donut by holding Sexton, I think you can get rid of him. But I would be inclined to hold if it's not going to kill you this week and just see what happens.
I just don't think he's going to have the firepower behind his scoring if he plays alongside Powell. So I guess that's the biggest issue. But look, their backline held firm last week, and they looked quite good. So maybe they do no changes. We'll have to wait and see. But if we move on to his colleague, Tuk. Look, Tuk Miller's been a little bit of a disappointment for owners. He's now down to 528k. He's actually 16k cheaper than he started his season when we thought that he was really good value, and he's got a break even now of 144. Averaging 107 on the year, which probably doesn't paint the full picture. I think a lot of his owners would say he's probably been saved late in a lot of games with, I guess, some crucial goal scoring or crucial touches to really get a lot of scaling in that last quarter. 5-round average now of 96. What are you going to do with Tuk?
Tuk's an interesting one because he's averaging 107, which is a little bit kind of below that mark you want, but it's not horrendous for an M8, I guess, kind of role. So if you do 107 on the way home, you wouldn't be that upset with it. But the question is, can he? Because he hasn't been that great in recent weeks, and I think he was actually the one that they chose to tag on the weekend just gone. I know Chizo and I actually talked through Gold Coast run a little bit last week, I think it was. Or it might have been you and I prior when we were talking about Noah Anderson.
Yes, it was us.
And talking about the Gold Coast run coming up, it's hard. They've got 3 nice matches before the end of the year. They've got North again, they've got West Coast again, they've got Richmond again. But apart from that, they've got Freo, they've got Collingwood, they've got Port, they've got GWS. They're essentially 4 of some of the hardest. Plus then they got Brisbane and Essendon, who are pretty hard as well. So it's not like they've got a nice kind of draw. But I don't know, we could probably even put Clary in the same boat as Tuk in this underperforming midfielder that has a bye now, so you could move off them and try and get to, if I was getting off them, I'd want to get to a primo that's come off their bye and misses no more games for the rest of the year. So a Neil or a Dunkley or a Sarong or a Butters or whoever it might be.
What about Goulden?
That's an interesting one. I don't think Goulden is probably... He's just not getting enough disposals to kind of be that 115 guy we scored last year. I think he's playing a bit more on the outside. Heaney's kind of just in there being their main man. Goulden obviously had a really good game on the weekend, but everyone scores really well against Geelong this year for a midfielder point of view. So he's nice and cheap. I did consider him because I said my team's just floundering, treading water. Should I go for a pod and just see what happens? If you're in that boat, maybe, but I think if you're competing at the pointy end, I think Goulden will have a few bad games again that might let you down. What do you think about Goulden? And do you own Tuk?
No, I don't have Tuk or Oliver. So none of those guys. I got my own issues. The McRaes and the Stewarts of the world.
I'm sure we'll talk about them soon. But what would your advice be?
They've been swiftly dealt with. No, I don't think there's much difference between Tuk and Goulden, to be honest. I think a lot of the time they pepper the 90s, high 90s, or low tons, and then every now and then they just go bang, and they just put out these really good scores. So I think if you're avoiding a donut, sure, but I don't think you're getting too much from that trade. Honestly, I like, in a perfect world, if you can push these players, any of these players we talk about, well, maybe not McRae, if you can push any of these players to the bench and have a 23rd premium, I think you're doing okay. Tuk, if you could loophole Tuk in Rosie when he's back or Rosie and Oliver, you're probably going to get some decent scores and some decent cover. I think I would prefer that route than spending up to get another mid who isn't one of the big, what do we come up with, the big 5, the Bont, the Butters, the Sarong.
We'll probably drop. They're probably the 4. Green
else.
And Rail, I think, have actually dropped a little bit from it. We did have a top 6, but I've got a bit less confidence in those guys now. So I'd say there's 4 I'm really confident in, and you've just named them.
I think if you can get to one of those guys, it makes more sense. But every other premium midfielder, I should say, every other premium midfielder is just having these down games. And it, well, you're jumping from the frying pan to the fire. Like, you're not necessarily looking at the grass is not always greener on the other side. I don't have a third one. But all these analogies are ringing true to me that Touk doesn't seem better or worse than Goulden, and doesn't seem that much better or worse than Oliver. Specifically, Oliver with Petrarca out. I think Oliver with Petrarca in is probably a little bit worse. But yeah, he's sub 500k. His time on ground was the best it had been since round 0. So Oliver, there's potential increase over there. And he's just peppering the 90s, and every now and then he's put out a 120 or a 140 or whatever it might be. So I think you just ride these guys now and you try and take the good scores when you can. That's probably my advice, unless you're missing those big guys or missing the big guys in the other lines, which would include Luke Ryan.
Yeah, I think I really agree with you there. So to summarise, it's if you have the Touk or the Oliver, someone you're a bit disappointed with, we don't think it's worth going sideways to like a Goulden or even an LDU or whoever it is, because they could do exactly the same thing as these guys are doing. But it probably is worth going sideways if you don't have Butters and Sarong in particular, because they've had their bye. So they're my targets. Merritt you could look at, but he's got his bye, so you probably wouldn't trade into him. Bont also has his bye next week, so I'd rather you wait unless you're really swell in that bye. But yeah, if you don't have Sarong, Butters or Ryan, I think, I'd tick off sidewaysing them if you've got enough trades, but I wouldn't tick it off just to anyone.
So I guess as we talk about the big four, players, I guess, in the mid that you basically at this stage have to get, are there the equivalents in the forward line and the back line where you just say, look, I've got a McRae that's not performing, or I've got a Tom Stewart that's not performing, and I've got a chance to get the big four equivalent in the back line or forward line? Do you have some of those guys?
Yeah.
Off the top of your head?
I think Heaney, I think Cheese and I mentioned this last week. I think every single team should have Heaney, Flanders, Zorko and Fisher in their forward line.
Yeah.
If they're not, the big four. Rankin, when he comes back, maybe could join that, but we've still got to wait and see a little bit on that. But yeah, I'd say those big four that I just mentioned. And with those big four, 3 of them have had their bye, so they're primed to get now and ride all the way home. So even if you had Touk in the midfield and you didn't have Zorko, I would tick that move off and just put Zorko in your forward line or even mid, whatever. So I think there's those big four. In the defence, I've got a big 2 with Ryan and Dacos. I think you should absolutely buy Ryan this week. You think he's a great purchase. Dacos obviously just got tagged, got injured, might play, might get rested, then has a bye. So I wouldn't buy Dacos yet, but I think you want him for the run home. But I think 99% of coaches have Dacos, so that's a bit of a moot point. Then there's a bit of a dropper.
What about Sheezel?
That's an interesting one because he's still playing that mid-forward role and not the super saucy seagull defender role, but he's still scoring really, really well in that midfielder role. So I do worry that a drop-off's going to come and he's not going to be like the 120 guy like these other two. But, I mean, he has proven that incorrect.
He's doing it. He's got a 121 3-round average playing.
We'll go through this
role
a bit later, but also North Melbourne have the best draw out of any team for midfielders for the run home. So, yeah, maybe you just play that draw game. So, Sheezel, maybe let's put Sheezel in the camp. I don't have him at the Ryan and Dacos level, but you've convinced me.
I think anyone that's going consistently 115, doesn't matter what position, I just okay, yeah, that's an easy pick. I mean, Fisher's got a 5-round average since he returned from his injury, 5-round average of 116.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these guys, if you don't have them in your team, they're just destroying you. unfortunately.
So do you put Tom Stewart in the same boat as Tuke and Clary?
I think Tom Stewart, it's a really interesting one because he's been tagged so many times this year, but when he hasn't been tagged, he still doesn't look like old Tom Stewart.
Yeah, he's a fair way off the pace, I think.
So it's not looking great. It's not looking great, to be honest. I think I would trade him. I mean, I have him this week, and I am trading him to Luke Ryan, so I am following through on that advice that I'm
giving. Very good.
I mean, it doesn't really feel like Luke Ryan at the moment has a 5-round average of 137, so it doesn't really feel like I can succeed without Luke Ryan at the moment. Even if Brendan Cox comes back and impacts Luke Ryan a little bit, it's not like he's doing a massive amount of intercept marking. Like, he's getting the cheap possessions. That's why he's scoring so well. He's getting the bulk volume of it. Him and Jordan Clark just playing chip to chip, like kick to kick.
Yeah, it's sustainable as well, the way Luke Ryan's scoring, so I don't think he's slowing down. But if you look at Stewart's last 5 games, he had an 84 that was tagged by Port. He had a 75 that was tagged by, did a Holman go to him maybe? GWS, he scored 110, but he was on 50 with about 5 minutes left or 10 minutes left, and then just went Super Saiyan. So that was an absolute fluke. Then he scored another 76 against Richmond, who should be really, really easy. That's so easy to score against for defenders. And then he scored a 76 against Sydney, who are also a positive matchup for defenders. So he's so far off the pace that I would absolutely get rid of him. I'd prioritise and get rid of Stewart before, like, Tuke and Clary, for example. But again, I wouldn't try and go sideways to, like, for example, a Blakey or a Whitfield. I would try and get one of those big dogs you don't have. And you might have all the big dogs that we've just mentioned, and then you could just have a bit of fun with it, I guess. But
I think Jordan Clark is in 5% of teams with a 5-round average of 116.
Yeah, I'm actually weighing up, do I go Stewart to Clark or Sheasel? Like, I'm putting him nearly on that level.
Well, they're not too dissimilar. I mean, Clark's numbers in the last 3 have been absolutely outrageous. He's almost like a mini, I think he's got 137 3-round average, is like a mini Luke Ryan. I mean, he's going to get the tag in round 16 against Swans, as he did before. But if you're getting these ridiculous scores, you can't really, like, it's fine. I mean, in his 5-round average of 116, he has a tagged Swans game. So you take that every day of the week. I think he's a really good buy at 580. I probably like him more than many of the midfielders at the moment. Like, Walsh, Rowell, Jordan Clark. I mean, they're all scoring really similar. There's definitely this year the team compositions. I'm going with 7 defenders, and I think I like that. I think that's the play this year if you can. They're just outscoring a lot of the midfielders at the moment. Maybe they won't have the ceiling, but the consistency might pay off, hopefully. I don't know. It's going to be close. We're fun to watch, see how it goes at the end of the year.
Well, I think a lot of those defenders will be pretty on par with some of the, like, M10-ish midfielders. So, yeah, I don't think having 7 defenders is a bad thing at all.
What do you think of Jack Sinclair? He moved to the halfback last week, 0 CBAs. So he fully was back into his role where he's gotten 115 in the past. Took some kickouts, basically looked like old Jack Sinclair, and scored 147.
If Jack Sinclair was staying, if we knew he was staying in defence, which, to be fair, St Kilda's messaging has been that he is going back to defence and he's going to play defence. So I don't know what more they need to say, actually, but for some reason I haven't fully believed it. Yeah, I'm interested, very. I wish he didn't have the last bye. Like, if he already had his bye, I might actually just take a punt on him. But I don't want to buy someone that's got a bye coming up. he does have an incredible run in terms of 8 of their last 9 games are at Marvel, where he does score a lot better. And then the other game is at Adelaide Oval, which is generally a good scoring ground for fantasy. So in terms of actually venue he's playing at, like really, really good run home, I'm just going to get DFS up and look at their actual also quite a favourable draw. They've got the 5th easiest draw for kind of his role, that kind of winger / attacking defender role. They've got one of the easy run homes. So, yeah, Jack Sinclair is absolutely an option. I just wish he didn't have that buy, because you kind of – I wouldn't recommend buying him now because he misses a week the following week. But I really actually do like it if we think he's going to stay defence.
I think if you have Sexton and you're holding him to see what happens and it doesn't go as you expect, I think you can trade to Jack Sinclair off his bye, and that would be a super good POD on the way home, under 5% ownership. He plays 8 of his last 9 at Marvel, where he scores particularly well. I think that would be a ripping POD on the way home to try and get ahead. But I wouldn't pick. I know I had a question in our podcast questions group on Slack about him versus like Luke Ryan and saving some cash. Luke Ryan's just in another ballpark. He's averaging 130. Like that's how do I put it bluntly that that's 0.2 less than Gawn, who's the highest scoring player in the game. Like Luke Ryan might very well be the highest scoring player in the game.
So I feel like
which is
I feel like we've kind of not even meaning to made a list of what we could nearly call must-haves, and like no one's a must-have. You could still survive the season without them, but I think we're saying if you don't, if at this stage or if by the end of the buys you don't have these players, they should be the ones you want. And I think we've said Luke Ryan, Nick Dacos, you put Harry Sheasel in the mix, and then we've said Butters. Bont, Sarong, Merritt. we'll put Gawn in there as the ruck, obviously. I think your R2 you could get away with a few different players, so I'm not going to recommend
For
and
sure.
then in the forward line you want Heaney, Zorko, Flanders and Fisher. So I think those are they should be your A-grade targets once they have their bye. So if you don't have those guys, do whatever you can to get them. And then however else you fill out your team isn't as big a deal. I think it could be kind of just, picking and choosing who has good matchups or who's had their bye when and whatnot. Does that sound all right? Or do you think people could, get away with not having, say, Ryan and Flanders to run home or something?
I mean, if you can get those guys there, they're the best. If you're missing 1 or 2, you'll probably be fine. You just make do with what you can get. But yeah, they're the guys that I'd be prioritizing above all else before you beget.
Before you beget?
Just before you beget. Before you get a little tricky with your POD picks. I think that's kind of where
that's a good way to summarize it.
As you said, Rankin as well. Rankin could be in that bucket as a POD that people can't really afford to get back at the end of the year. And before we move on, I think. Do you think Tom Green's in the same category as Tukanova?
Yeah, I do. I think he could absolutely turn around and kind of be fine. For a lot of the year, I projected Tom Green as one of those mids you wanted and going close to 120. I've called on that a lot, but there's no reason Tom Green can't go a 105 for the rest of the year and still be really good.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, he's getting a lot of the ball. It's just he can't get it out to anyone because their entire midfield's been injured. So they just need some players to return so you can, pass it out to somebody rather than just to space.
Yeah, if Kelly and
weird.
Canelio come back, that actually probably helps him.
Tom Green's like a big unit, and he's obviously, he's come through as the pretty much the greatest contested ball winner in juniors almost ever. But he always handballs it out when he's caught rather than just holding it. I mean, now because of the new holding the ball rule makes a bit more sense. But even before that rule change, he'd always kind of flick it out at all costs. And a lot of players would hold it in, so rather than turn it over. But he never does that. It's a little bit. It's quite interesting. All right, pick. What have you got up next for us?
Well, I think we should talk a little bit about rookies and how there aren't any.
Wow, that's a quick segment.
So that's all. No, not quite. Billy Dowling is on the radar, played a good game, actually had a really good fantasy game and didn't quite translate to SuperCoach, but then he saved it at the end. I think he's going to be a good player, but he racks it up in the sandful and looked like he could do that in the AFL too. He has this week, doesn't go up in price, and then has a buy. So, I mean, you could buy him, but also we're just looking at Adelaide have 4 players that they've just said who are healthy and could come back. We did look at it. I'm not really sure any of them really play his role. But there are so there was Tex and Rankin coming back. And they're tests. So if they get through training this week, they could come back. There's Nick Murray and Braden Cook as well, who are healthy, potentially and could come back. So not necessarily that they play Dowling's role, but that's 4 healthy bodies that could come back and he could get kicked out. So I'm not I bought him last week just for a warm body on field for that week. And he's 123K, I think. So it didn't really worry me if he gets dropped. But if you're relying on him to play for a few rounds for you, I'm not certain. Any other thoughts on Billy?
Yeah. No, I think you've summarised it well. If he can hold his spot, he might be okay. I don't love it because of the ins. Like Rankin could definitely come in for him. They had many worse players than him last week. So I think he gets another round, and that honestly might be all you need for this week. I think if the DPP is important to you, then he's a mid forward, so that could be the go. I think the other 123K guy, Kruger, plays North Melbourne this week, so big Collingwood key forward playing against North Melbourne should hopefully mean some decent points, but he's never played more than 3 consecutive matches in a row in his career because he always gets injured. So I feel the same way that I do with Dowling. It's like Dowling probably gets dropped but might hold, and Kruger probably gets injured but might hold. I feel pretty confident that Kruger's a best 22 guy when he's fit, or at least close to it. Cox is out for 5 to 7 weeks still, so that's enough for the season.
I think if I had to buy one of them, it would be Kruger because I'm more confident in his job security, and you can't predict an injury. Like, he is injury prone, but sometimes injury prone players actually just play a season. It could happen.
Yeah. Adelaide said Kieran Strawn, who was subbed out in the third, who I did trade in last week, was he's okay. He just lost power in his groin, whatever that means. And as long as he passes training, I think too much information there. But if he gets through training, they said he's available for selection. I don't know if that means he's going to hold out Riley O'Brien, but if he gets named for a second, I don't mind. Like, most of these guys we don't think are going to play out the year, right? No. So if you're picking somebody that is potentially going to be a number 1 ruck for like the rest of the year, I don't mind it as your R3, and you just hope he does, and then you've got cover for the rest of the year, and that could be really good. But again, Kruger is ruck forward status, so that might be the smarter play. Anyway, that's a summary of like the 123K guys. McMuffin, Toby McMullen, played as the sub. He came on in the last quarter and scored 50 points.
He's good.
His points per minute ratio is absurd. Like, it's out of this world. He's been the sub multiple times and scored really well in those games. I don't really know what to say other than his scoring is not sustainable, and I can't imagine that he scores 200 from a full game, and I don't even know if he'll get a full game. But at 157K, he seems like the guy that might have the best scoring potential. And another name's just to throw out to you, Jackson Archer scored 72 and he's 173K, which is a getting a little bit pricey. Dan Butler has fallen now to 175k, but he has the bye next week. But his job security you'd think is decent for 175k, so he could be an option, although I still don't love it. Same as, I guess, Daniel Turner's fallen to 164k, but has a bye this week, so you probably don't need him. Luke Bruce is the sub often, is 167k. Look, going to be honest, outside of, I don't know, there's actually no one that I'm super excited about. I know I saw some people talk about Braden Campbell because he's been the sub multiple times, so he's down to 182k. But he's just not best 22. He's not banging down the door to be let into this Swans team. So I'd stay away from him. Jack Carroll played a full game for Carlton, but he scored 29. He's down to 127k, so he could be a cash cow twice in 1 year.
I don't mind that if we knew he wasn't going to be the sub. That one I don't mind.
Yeah. That's. I mean, you can't know though if you're picking this week, unfortunately. And Jai Menzie with Redmond out played down back and he scored 92, and he's 209k. So that might be the only one that's raises my eyebrow a little bit. But at this stage of the year, I think I'd rather take the flyer on the 102k
I agree.
rookie and save some cash. Unless you're desperate for a warm body this week, in which case the answer is probably Dowling or Kruger.
So I actually think, I agree with you that the 102 is potentially where we want to go, and trying to predict who they will be is going to be quite hard. But if you don't need the warm body, like say you've already got 21 this week and it's more like you need the green dot for the following week, Hutchinson for the Eagles, it's that 102k guy, did all right, should just stick in that team. So if you don't need them playing this week and you don't care about trading a buy player in and it's actually next week you need to cover, he could be the one. Otherwise, you hope a different 102 guy's name. Like there was Blight for Richmond that's done well in the VFL. Maybe he gets a go, although Richmond got a win, so maybe they don't make a change. There was Sard 2.0 for Essendon that looked amazing in the VFL. Essendon were down by like 30 points or something, and then in the last quarter, he pretty much got them over the line, kicked 4 goals, had a heap of disposals, looked like the best player in the VFL, and then got injured right at the end of the game. So I don't know how bad that is yet. I heard
they said 6 to 8 weeks.
Geez, it was a Cindy. Okay, I don't know why you let me talk about him then.
No, as in he's the only 102k defender midfielder DPP, which I need to have in my team for my defensive structure, my 7 defenders to work. So likely next week I'm trading him in.
Maybe he'll come good for SuperCoach finals for you.
There we go. Fingers crossed. Yeah. I'm putting everything on
There's no more real cash cows I wanted to talk about, but people in the top 15 traded in, I think he's at number 11 most traded in, is Jai Simpkin. Any urge at all for you?
Absolutely zero. Like, what's less than zero urge in SuperCoach? At this stage of the year, if I'm picking an F7, I'm going to pick someone with more of a ceiling than Simpkin. I know he iced the game with 2 goals in the last quarter against West Coast and scored 129. Clutch. Pick, how often do you think that's going to happen? Like, he's averaged until that point 58, and I know maybe his role might be a little bit better, but they're just going to be throwing things everywhere for the rest of the season. He's not the guy you're getting for a good spike score at 360k. I'm sure I can think of half a dozen options that I'd prefer to have at that price. This isn't a Salem situation, which I felt much better about than this. 60k more gets you Harry Mackay. 60.
Yeah,
that seems like a very big quality difference.
Or you wait a week or two and get Connor Rozee probably for 400k as maybe someone who can give you spikes on the way home.
Absolutely. I mean, the difference, between these players. Let's not even. I know it's a forward, but you've got to be pretty desperate to get down there. I mean, 50, 60k more. There's much better players in that range. So yeah, it's a complete no for me. Sorry, Pig, for bursting that bubble. Pretty.
Yeah. It wasn't my bubble. I didn't blow that up. All right.
That's fine. I'm not gonna pin that one to you.
That's all who I wanted to talk about in terms of trading in or trading out. Is there anyone else you want to talk about before we go on to the next area?
No.
All right.
Definitely not.
All right. What I wanted to do is kind of go through with you, play a little game. Look, this is not like a saw player game kind of thing.
Okay. That's good. That was my first thought.
Well, no, it's not that.
Yeah. I mean, if you saw what you look like, you would understand.
I don't look like them. So DFS Australia has some really good data in terms of looking at matchup difficulties. So you can look at it week to week in terms of, this week X player plays against Richmond, who are a great matchup for defenders. But they've also got a season-long rating, and they break it down into the different positions. So I was going to go through each position and I'll just name the top 5 teams, and I just want you to tell me if there's anyone that you would think of from those teams that we might look to trade in. And it's kind of, all right, and putting you on the spot here, but it's kind of like for example, if we go key forwards, I'll say Carlton have the best run for key forwards for the run home. Is there anyone, a key forward on Carlton, you think people should put on their radar?
I can think of 2.
Oh, go on.
I mean, Curnow and Mackay. I think Curnow is my number one choice there, but Mackay, for his price, probably presents decent value.
That's good. And I think I just want people to view this as just put these guys on your radar. Just because everyone, this team has a good run home, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to want them, but they might just be if you're filling out that F6 or that M8. Like, there's there's a limited amount of games left now, so you can kind of play the difficulty fixture a bit. Is any key forward for Hawthorn, Gold Coast, Geelong or Sydney that you would look at for the run home?
No.
I don't think there'll be many
confident
forwards that you would actually be looking to trade in. We've talked about who most of them are. If we then go to general forwards, is there anyone from Collingwood who you would potentially look at?
Oh, Joe Richards. He's injured. But that's pretty funny that he's got a good run home, because I think he's really gonna, for people that can afford to keep Joe Richards through the buys, when he comes back into Collingwood's team, he's going to be awesome.
He could be a little F7 kind of spike guy.
Genuinely, I think he's. How much worse can he be than Simpkin?
Yeah. So Hawthorn have the second best matchup for general forwards. Anyone on Hawthorn you like?
Dylan Moore. That's one of the reasons I traded him in.
Absolutely. I agree. One of the best runs coming home. West Coast, anyone? Jake Waterman, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like it's too volatile with West Coast, so I'd probably stay clear.
Any forwards for North or Bulldogs? They round out the top 5 easiest forward matchups.
No, I don't think any tickle my fancy.
No, I agree. All right, so we now go to inside midfielders, and this has actually changed because, we've got one less game now. But Hawthorn have the best run for inside midfielders for the remainder of the year. Anyone on Hawthorn you like?
That's Will Day. A little bit of a
Will Day is awesome.
He has been just insanely good. My problem is always going to be that he's a little bit injury prone. And I owned him last year, and I held him the whole year. I didn't get frustrated at him, but he looks phenomenal at the moment. He's leading his team to victory. He's got a 5-round average of 118. He's putting the team on his back. He's clutch in key moments. He pretty much can do everything. He's a star, this guy.
I agree. If he had already had his bye, I would probably purchase him just for the fun factor, because I'm kind of at that point where my team's not going to win anything, so I'm going to have some fun, but I don't know if I will buy him because he's got a bye coming up. Then we got...
1.4% of teams.
Yeah,
almost
that's
nothing.
Awesome. So the second easiest team for inside midfielders, or the second easiest run, is North Melbourne. Any North midfielders you like?
Sheasel.
Yeah. LDU?
I mean, I guess I think he's been playing better, but he's not cheap now. Like now he's $5.96.
Yeah.
If he was $5.50, then sure. I mean, he's got good potential, given a lot of people started him, and I think he could probably go like 110 plus on the way home. But now you're paying, like now he's not good value. Like you're paying overs for him now.
But, you've mentioned Sheasel a few times on this podcast. I think he deserves that accolades. And those that traded him out, like me, when he went into that forward role, are probably regretting it now. Although for me, that was what allowed me to get Luke Ryan, so I don't hate it, but I'd like Sheasel back. Then the third easiest run is Carlton.
Oh, that's Walsh. Weirdly enough, Walsh had really low time on ground last week.
He did.
I don't know why. He kept going to the bench all the time. It was very frustrating to watch. But I do think he'll be a good pick for the rest of the season.
I agree. Collingwood have the fourth easiest run for inside midfielders. That's Nick Dacos.
Nah, I think we'll give it a pass there.
Well, Nick Dacos, if you don't have him, you should maybe wait till he's after his bye and he's not hurt, but that's one. And then Freo have the fifth easiest run for inside midfielders coming home.
Can we talk about Andy Brayshaw?
I thought you were going to talk about Caleb Sarong just going to be the best player in the game coming home, but let's talk about Andy.
No, I think that's like a dead given. Like, yes, try and get Sarong. He's very, very good and is in that big boy category. I think Andy Brayshaw has gone 104 for the year, but he's put up, like last year we didn't pick him because he had a really low floor and a massive ceiling. He was a flat track bully. And Fife has been more involved, so it's been him that's been, I guess, a little bit more fringe because Young's also moved into the midfield, yada, yada, yada. But his floor has actually drastically improved. Like, he has a season low of 83. So he's not getting those super low games anymore. And, he's not the first one tagged. Obviously, Sarong is. And with a good run of games coming up, I guess Hawthorn are no longer an easy beat. But at 537K, I think if you needed to cheap out and you were shopping on a budget, I don't mind. I don't mind the pick.
I think that's absolutely an option.
As a POD.
Yeah. He wasn't someone that I was considered at all, but with that easy run, and I didn't quite realise that his floor was that actually pretty good, so not a bad option. And coming off his bye, has no more byes to come home, so that helps.
Yes. Yeah.
If we look at the top five easiest ruck runs, in the top five, there's Richmond, Geelong, Hawthorn, and West Coast. I'm kind of going to skim over those because there aren't really any relevant. Sorry, Nankervis, but there aren't really any like super relevant SuperCoach guides. But the second easiest ruck run coming home is Carlton. Could people look at Tom de Koning?
Oof. Boy, he looks good.
He's insane.
I mean, can you do it though? Like, Pitney could return at any moment and then he's just a dead pick.
That's what scares me.
I think he went up 70K last week, so I really felt like it was last week or never.
Mm-hmm.
I probably would just leave it, but that would be a fun pick.
That would be as fun as it gets. But I have seen on Slack, like, Carlton fans are divided. Some don't want to see Pitnet back and they want to see Tom just unleashed, but some think they need Pitnet.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like even the fans don't really know what Carlton's going to do here.
No, they don't, and we don't either. So, apologies. It's in the too hard basket.
All right, so then we go into they group this together, wingers and attacking defenders. So if you think of it as guys like Goulden or Whitfield or Jordan Clark, that kind of like running from the back line into the kicking into the forward line role. The easiest run is Adelaide. Anyone from Adelaide?
I mean, look, we'll say Hinge has been for those. I was looking at it the other day. I don't know if people are aware of Hinge's year. He's averaging 95, which is really not that bad as a breakout candidate, I guess. He's just a little bit erratic with his scoring. With a good run home, probably can push 100, but this feels like more of a draft pick. He's in 1.3% of teams. It's not my favorite pick out of all of the PODs, but he's one to watch, I guess.
Yeah, and then second easiest run is Carlton. I know there was actually a couple of people in Slack asking, is Adam Sard close enough to the mark? Or I think Nick Newman actually is a really, really good option for your D6. Any thoughts on those two?
Sard. Didn't I missed that message? But yeah, Nick Newman. I think that we saw the best that Nick Newman could go last year, and that was huge. Like scary good. But we're not going to get. I just don't think we're going to get that level ever again. He just put out a 57. I think you probably are getting 100 flat for the rest of the year, so he's probably fair value. But he's on his buy, so yeah, you could buy him off his buy. But again, 545k, it's not like super cheap to make it worthwhile trading him in.
And the third easiest run for those wingers and attacking defenders is GWS, which makes me think Lockie Whitfield. But also in this ranking, they've got Sydney as a green easy team, which they are for most defenders, but not for Lockie Whitfield. So that probably actually makes it harder for him.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
Then these next two teams actually really interest me a lot. Freo have the fourth easiest run for this. So it's not necessarily the Luke Ryan type, it's the Jordan Clark type. So Jordan Clark has a juicy run home.
With
Swans, yeah. So as I said, they're ranked as a green on this, but if you get tagged, it becomes a bright red. Jordan Clark's a real option. And then as we said earlier in the podcast, St Kilda have a really good run home for this Jack Sinclair or Nasai Wanganeen Malira type role.
Yeah, I think both of them are good options, but I think Sinclair has a higher upside, and he's a huge POD. So if you can manage to swing him in, I really like him.
Then they break down a category into general defenders, but general defenders kind of aren't generally the ones that score well. It's usually either that attacking winging type or the designated kickers.
Let's skip that category. I don't think there's any SuperCoach relevancy.
I agree. And then designated kickers, we'll go through. Essendon have the best run coming home. So I guess Essendon have a few. Yeah, Ridley.
Nick Martin.
Yep. They both could fall into that category.
Ridley is really interesting. I mean, he's had 3 really decent scores, and now he's in 12% of teams.
Yeah,
already.
And Tuesday and I talked about him last week, and we both loved him and would want him, but I didn't recommend it because of the buy he has right now. So I was of the opinion if you want Ridley, just wait a week and pay up after the buy, and maybe some people do that, but some people got on him, and I think he will be rewarded. Like we're just saying, the easiest run home, and actually, and I'm looking at by how much, it's like the easiest run by quite a bit. So yeah, Ridley, maybe Martin benefits.
He's going to be a good pick. Yeah, I don't think I wouldn't be trading Martin out. I know he goes forward at times, and that's frustrating. But the run, while he's there, could be really good. And would they do that if he's... I mean, I guess they have done it when he's got 20 possessions and a half. We'll have to wait and see how it is. But I like holding Martin and Ridley and just hoping that the fixture comes good for them both. They play a lot at Marvel and MCG. I think only one game from this point onwards outside of Marvel or MCG. Literally just round 24.
They played at a lot of like random grounds to start the year, and now they're kind of getting their Melbourne run. So I just saw it. Designated kicker here does have a. They all have definitions, but this is players who take the majority of their team's kick-ins, or also those set-up players. So like a Luke Ryan, where they'll go back to it and set it up. Anyone in North Melbourne that fits that bill, because they have the second easiest run home. Yep.
Fisher.
Zach Fisher is going to, if he keeps that role, he's not stopping.
No, he's almost a must-have at this point.
Third easiest is Brisbane. Yeah.
Zocco.
There's some good players with some great runs coming home here. Just further adds to what we said before about just try and go get these guys if you don't have them. Carlton pop up again for defenders, so maybe that's Nick Newman again. We talked about him. Any Port Adelaide defenders that take kickouts and are designated kickers?
Houston.
There we go. So, yeah, I agree with you. Dan Houston is going to have a good run home. Hopefully, he has played a higher percentage of his games at Adelaide Oval already. Like their fixture was loaded towards Adelaide Oval at the start of the year, which would make me think they don't have as many Adelaide Oval games coming home. But when you're playing against, teams like St Kilda and Bulldogs and Richmond and Sydney that give up a lot of points to defenders, I think Dan's a good pick coming home as well.
Yeah, I don't even know who gets tags, if it's Butters or Houston, Jordan Clark tag when they play Swans. So, yeah, Houston could be a very good pick. And it's probably fair. He's 566K and he's averaging 109. That's probably close to fair to decent-ish value. Pretty good. No, I think it's good value. I don't know. It's almost the same price as Newman and he's much better than Newman.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, if you're choosing between them, similar run home, and I think Houston has bigger. Houston's got a bit of...
It's got a 157 break-even as well.
So you could get him cheaper.
Much cheaper next week.
Cool. All right. Well, that was all the positions I wanted to run through. I think we've given people a little bit something to think about. They're not necessarily people you buy, but just put them in the back of your mind that, Carlton key forwards have a great run coming home, or Freo midfielders or whatever it might be. Dane Zorko, Zach Fisher have awesome runs coming home. Just put those in your mind in case you're planning your final trades, or even if someone, God forbid, gets injured and you need to do a sideways and then you might look at the fixture to determine who you want to end with.
Awesome. All right. Well, on that note, thank you everybody for tuning in. You can catch myself if you have any questions at pistol_DISC on X, formerly known as Twitter. You can find Pig at Pig_DISC. You can find Cheezer with a Z at Cheezer_DISC and JB at JB_DISC. Thank you all, and we'll catch you next week.